The Rural Online Initiative is an amazing program that was ahead of its time and is going to continue to create opportunities for our rural residents to be able to live where they work and, or flip that, work where they live and enjoy the quality of life that so many in this world are coming to Utah to have. The governor understands rural Utah better than anybody. And so advisement is a little different, right? It's not advising him to be aware of the potential or the history. It's to keep him abreast of the current and to be able to help him understand the dynamics that are happening right now, right? He has a long history and great relationships. So, but as new things come along, or if he wants to be able to innovate things, you know, I can be that person for him in rural Utah. But here's the thing, and the governor will say this is a huge team approach, right? You know, they call it a cabinet for a reason, right? And so we all work so closely together. Almost every agency has a play into rural Utah, and they have a strategy and effort to move that forward. So it's just working with all of them to be effective and efficient with taxpayer dollars. We're setting a framework for success that others can jump onto. So there is not a 4-point metric that we are here to solve. There's a 4-point approach to ensuring we set the right framework for other people to be successful in their communities with their goals, right? So we talked earlier about when you communicate with the county, it's what are you working on, how can we help, right? So if there's one thing that we're working on, it's just a support for them to be successful. I've spent most of my career in a position where remote work is a part of it. I previously ran a division for the state prior to coming to Southern Utah University. And during that time, I was mobile. My workstation was my backpack, right? You talk about co-working locations, well, I was that. I would often work in 2 or 3 different employment centers or state offices in one day. And so before the idea of remote work was even out there, right, in Utah, I was functioning in that design. And, you know, living in Laverican, I ran a state division for several years. Now, I wasn't working at my home every day, right? I was out throughout the state, but that concept was there. So remote work has always been a part of my life. And then prior to that, you know, as our eligibility services division, you know, this goes back 15 years ago. We set a model when 2008 happened, and we needed to be more effective and efficient. We created a statewide contact center, and immediately that opened the door for remote work. We moved several hundred workers to remote work from their homes, and we tested it. Kanab, Panguitch, all these smaller communities, you know, Roosevelt, Vernal, Moab, you know, and set that up years in advance and learned quite a bit about it. So when the pandemic hit, Department of Workforce Services pivoted pretty quick with their eligibility services division. Well, the ROI program gets those skill sets into private citizens' hands, right? It gives them access to compete in arenas they haven't felt like they could compete in previously. And that's powerful. You know, it's one thing to say, I'm currently employed and my employer is going to now invest in me to go home. But that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is somebody that says, I would like to compete for a job and do that job where I live. And in order to do that, I need to understand how to be able to function in that environment and compete for that. And that's very different. And so ROI is unique and the only one in Utah that I can see that's doing that. You know, I hear the great stories of individuals that are learning how to compete for jobs all over the U.S., right? I mean, there was a certain point where there were more people getting jobs in New York than in Utah, right? And a pay and salary in New York compared to Utah can be quite a bit higher, right? And so that is, we've seen some great success with that. The other success is the ability to kind of compete in the gig environment where you might not be a full-time employee, where you're going to use your specialty to go out and build your resume, and we're seeing success with that. So this is really cool. I think this is the future of where our higher education work-based learning goes. Yeah, I'm an example of that. I grew up in Delta, Utah, and I have 0 siblings who live in Delta, Utah. We all dream of working back there. There's probably, two of us that could now at this point if we wanted to. But coming out of high school, there were real no, career aspiration opportunities for us to stay there. We had the power plant in agriculture. Other than that, go get an education. Maybe you can come back and teach, right, or a state job. But that's changed now, right? If I'm growing up in Delta, Utah right now, I can go get a very technical degree and stay there. In fact, I can go get a MD and emphasize in psychology and then use telehealth and be a provider of mental health and reside in Delta, Utah right now, right? I mean, the pandemic increased your mental health, telehealth, connectivity, 50+%. So it's totally changed. So let me tell you a story. We showed up in Kanab a few weeks ago, and two brothers came in and shared this story about how they were raised in Kanab, and they found that they were able to then now with their jobs, remote work, they got to choose where they lived. So they came back to Kanab, and guess what? There's 8 children across those two brothers now infused into elementary school. They literally increased the percentage of children in that elementary school by 3%, right? And now one of them is coaching high school level, sports. I'm sure they're involved in religious, opportunities and civic opportunities. They're making a difference in their community, right? They're bringing the talent they have back to the community they love and they're invested in. And the communities that are small, they thrive when they see that come back in, right? So those are powerful experiences.